Hello, everybody, and welcome. So my name is Steven, and this is the show where we bring together HR experts to break down really the fundamentals of some of the most important topics in HR. So our topic today is screening interviews, and I have with me some amazing guests. Say hello, guests.
Hello.
Hello.
I'll intro them real quick. So we have Ben Eden, HR executive coach. We have an HR strategist, Heather Skillman. Catherine McCord, who is the president and people operations consultant at Titan Management. And last but not least, Blake Wilson, who is the Michelangelo of recruiting. And on LinkedIn, he specifies the Ninja Turtle, not the painter. So thank you guys so much for being here. Really excited to just dive in. So let's do that. Screening interviews. Heather, I'd love if you could kind of just paint a picture and kind of give a definition up front. What are screening interviews?
Screening interviews, I think, should serve two purposes. The first one is you're getting to see if they're going to be a right fit, not only in skills and ability, but also to the culture of the organization. And the second thing that's most important is you're still recruiting them into the organization. So you want to be able to have that opportunity to also share things about the organization. So that's really what's important.
Yeah. And just kind of a follow-on question there, because I know we want to distinguish this from like the second round interview or panel interviews or group interviews. There's so many ways to talk about interviewing. Mm-hmm. What makes like a screening interview different? And Heather, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And then Ben, maybe as well, you could jump in.
So again, the screening interview is you are, if it's the first time, the first impression of the organization. So that's something to keep in mind when you're talking to the candidate. And that's why, again, you're putting on your recruiter's hat because you want to make sure that they're interested in the organization. But you also do want to make sure they're going to be a right fit, not only just in skills and abilities, but, is their communication style going to fit, is who they are going to kind of fit into the organization. So that's really why it is you're getting the kind of the who, what, when, where, and why out in the very beginning. So then there can be more in-depth going forward if they move forward to the next opportunity.
Yeah, love that. I love what you said about just the first impression, right? In both ways. Ben, do you have any thoughts on kind of what makes the screening interview different and special from different interview types?
Oh, sure. Yeah, especially the ones that you mentioned, like panel and group, right? I mean, those are multiple people generally. And generally, the screening interview is a one-person kind of thing. And it's a short phone call, for example, or a video interview. We'll get into that later, I'm sure, but it's a very short thing just to verify the basics that you've probably already asked, and then a level beyond. Maybe because they responded to your request to have a screening interview, then they're still interested. And sometimes that whittles out 50% of your applicants.
Yeah.
And then you keep going and you say, okay, they were interested. They still met my basic qualifications, and they're good enough to go on to the next step.
Awesome. And I think you started hitting on this a little bit. How do we really decide who is moving into the screening interview? And I assume it kind of comes from right, you're looking at resumes and things, and then you eventually reach out to some of these people. But Blake, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do you decide who makes it to that first screening interview?
Yeah, I think the most important thing for every role first is identifying what is most important to your company in that role. This can't be a gut check. Like if someone sends on their profile or their LinkedIn page that they love pickleball and I love pickleball, if this is a gut check, I'm hiring this person just because they love pickleball. That's not a great way to go through the process. So this needs to be something that you've identified beforehand with the hiring manager that you partner with. What are the most important things in this role that a person has to have? And you're verifying that they have those pieces, and then looking for any sharp red flags that might come up in that process. Can this person communicate in a way that represents your business? Can they communicate in a way that represents themselves? Do they actually match to the things that they promise? And what is their basic expertise level in those functions? This call and deciding who to talk to is a lot of making a call based on those skills that you need, and then letting people wow you and impress you, or kind of weed themselves out based on how they respond.
Awesome. And Catherine, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic as well. So if you're looking at all these resumes and all the applicants, hopefully you have a ton of them, right? And trying to figure out who to move to the screening interview. Is it exactly like Blake said, just the skills or what would you add to that?
First of all, I'd like to say he's not wrong. And, and I would definitely highlight what he said about communicating with the hiring managers and whoever is involved in the hiring decision. Whoever those people are, you need to have full communication and all be on the same page before you ever launch a job description, start interviewing people, any of that. That's highly, highly, highly important. I have a different approach than some recruiters. I don't feel the need to see all of the requirements on the resume. I don't feel a need to, mostly because resumes cannot possibly be all encompassing. That'd be a ridiculously long document. So if I see something that tells me I think this person could do the job, I'll reach out. And minus any red flags. I've definitely, even on a resume, seen some red flags that you're going, that was a weird thing to put out there. I don't know if I want to talk to this person. I have whole other stories about that, but I do look for any potential red flags that are just very glaring. But for the most part, I just look for the basics. Does this person look interesting? Is there something about them that gets me excited to talk to them, about something about their professional skills? Also, to Blake's point, very specifically, not their pickleball preference, but if they shine in some kind of way professionally, I gravitate to that 100%, and that's who I call.
Awesome.
Yeah. Can I tag along into that one too? Is the partnership with the hiring manager is really important, and especially in the beginning when you're first filling a new position you haven't done before. So a lot of times what I did is I would have my yes, maybe, and no piles, and I'd meet them with the hiring manager to say, am I close to what it is that you're looking for? And if I'd put somebody in the no pile that they were like, oh, I want to talk to this person, then I would make sure what was it that I missed. And as we started really collaborating, we were able to get more in tune with each other to the point of where I didn't need to always have those meetings. But in the very beginning, when you're just starting out, those are really key. And it also gives the manager more credibility with you as well, because if they start saying, yeah, these yeses are dead on, then you know that you're onto something. So that helps as well.
Love it.
So it's kind of pre-screening before the screening questions. So.
Yeah. And of course, like resume screening and all that is like a totally different conversation that we can get into another panel. But just to kind of put a fine point on this, who makes it to the screening interview question? Do you like, if you have a list, let's say of 20 applicants, right? And all 20 of them seem like they could do the job. Do you advance all 20 of them to the screening interview, or do you have to start kind of, maybe just the top 20% in your mind are moving to the screening? Or tell me about that. Does anyone have like a thought on that?
I think Catherine said something beautiful before, where she said like that when you're looking at these candidates, you can't fit a person on a piece of paper. And it's like stack ranking people based on their resume is incredibly difficult, and keeping a sense of fairness through the process. If someone's qualified and they're one of the first applicants, I like to go based on time that people have applied. If you're looking at equal, everyone's good, I'm looking at those people that applied first, because there's someone that's probably watching my career site if they're that quick at applying, or actively looking and excited about the opportunity, to maintain that sense of fairness, because who knows what unconscious bias could influence why someone's resume really stuck out to me.
Right.
So I want to go with who was qualified, first applied, and then I can move from there.
100%. That was exactly what I was going to say, by the way. I think we're on the same wavelength, Blake. I think we're just...
Love it. And I think, Ben, I heard you starting to talk to you.
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to back up to the other question, then I'll come back to this if that's okay. Because I know the people that we're talking to are often small departments. You have so many hats. You're like, how am I going to have time to do this? And maybe I haven't, so I want to be perfect. But we won't be perfect in recruiting. We're dealing with not only us as humans, but other humans. So realize that first and foremost, and then do try to simplify it. One way that I like to do it is kind of what Blake was saying. Find out what the hiring manager, their 3 must-haves are, and then 3 nice-to-haves. Because I can tell you way too many times the hiring manager comes and says, I want this, and it's the purple unicorn. You're like, well, it would be great if we could find that person, but you won't be able to afford them, or for some other reason, right? And so if you have a conversation like that, sometimes it's just a little bit of butting heads because, well, I can't, but I want, and this, that, and the other. So you have to say, what are the 3 must-haves? What are the 3 nice-to-haves? And then you do what Heather was saying and say, okay, here's what my first round looked like. I have 13 that meet what you were saying. I have 3 others that I think might be good for you based on what I know about the company. What do you think? And then you continuously have more and more conversations to hone in on what it is you're looking for versus who's applying, because there is a lot of timing involved too. And then answering this current question. This is something that I did. And of course, it depends on the timing of the role. In other words, how quickly you have to fill it and how many applicants you have. If, for example, I have an entry level, let's say call center position, where I often have, 20 to 30 applicants that technically could fill the role, but I need to fill it in 2 weeks. What we did would we would have on-site career fairs of our own and say, okay, if somebody's willing to come and show up and answer the questions, then we can get a great feel for them, all in a 1 hour time frame, and do that very well. Now, I imagine we can still do that same thing in the virtual environment, bring them to a Zoom, and if they show up, they're professional, they can answer some basic questions, then that really helps you filter them out.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for all that, Ben. And I think you're pushing the conversation in a new direction, which is, what is the format that these screening interviews actually take, right? Because I've heard phone conversations, video. You're talking about like this big fair you're doing, which I've heard, a lot of restaurants maybe even do, where they bring people in. So Heather, if you could kick this part off, and then maybe we can have Catherine chime in as well. What is the format that your screening interviews are usually taking?
So the format's usually a phone interview. So I'm reaching out and I've got my set questions on there. So it doesn't really necessarily even need to be video, because a lot of the times I'll just reach out and call them and ask my questions. And then if we need to do a video, we can, but the phone conversation still works. And I always, when I reach out to them, obviously I'm not going to dive right into the screening question if they're not prepared for it. I mean, I ask, hey, are you ready to go? I've got some questions. If not, we can schedule another time. Some of the people are ready to go right in, and that saves me time, and I can go straight into the screening questions. If not, then we schedule a time and then we'll be ready to go into it. But that's usually the one that I was most successful with, was doing the phone.
Yeah. And Heather, real quick before we move to Catherine, it sounds like these are cold calls sometimes, right? You're just calling straight by whatever number they had on the resume, or?
Yeah, I mean, you're letting them know. I mean, I always say, hey, you applied for this position. And so I had a couple questions. Is now a good time to talk about it, or do you want to schedule another time? So that can be the cold calling aspect of it. If you wanted to save time and email everybody out and then have your list of people to start calling, you can do that too. Again, it's kind of to Ben's point. How much time do I have? Do I need to fill this very quickly? Because I found if I'm calling people and I get them on the phone, it can almost speed the process up a little bit, as opposed to having to wait for emails and looking at scheduling times and doing everything there. So, yeah. And I was amazed at so many people were ready just to jump right in, and it was great because I had my questions ready to go. They asked questions for me. We were done, and I was able to follow up. So that's been most successful for me. So go ahead, Catherine.
Oh, no, you're good. I was listening. I was enjoying it. Thank you. So the first thing I would say is I always give candidates choices on format. I want them to feel comfortable. How are you comfortable? I've had people say, well, and I typically see that people prefer phone. That tends to be the preferred first method for an interview. But for some people who can't hear very well, that's difficult. So they want to see you and be able to kind of watch your mouth and read your lips, or maybe have a speech to text on their phone or something like that as they speak to you. Other people, they have various and sundry reasons why they want, different formats. So I tell all of my clients, offer different formats for every single stage, except for possibly the in-person. Sometimes that just needs to be done for certain purposes, and that's fine. But offer different formats. That's very, very important. And offer accommodations for just automatically with your invitation. Just, here it is. Here's your invitation, and here are links in case you need any of these things, because most people won't ask for the accommodation. So I think that that's important to bring up with this, because a lot of people miss that aspect, that people won't ask for an accommodation because they're afraid of discrimination. So make sure to have those things out there, and then make sure that you're keeping everything consistent. She was like, Heather was talking about, she had her questions set up. I don't script, but I have a certain, and this may not be, Heather may not script either, but I have a layout of what I need to know. I have a checklist for what I need to know. So I make sure I know all of those things before we're done. So make sure to be consistent. because that's a great way to avoid bias and to make sure that you're hiring the right person. Because if one person has a great interview, another person has a bad interview, and it's your fault, it's on your end, that can create all kinds of problems and you can miss out on great candidates.
Yeah, all great insights. I think covered plenty of different formats, and I love the idea of giving options and accommodations. And you're really moving us into kind of the next segment here, which is, okay, you have them on the phone or you have them in the video, right? Like, what are you asking them? And Catherine, it sounds like you have, you kind of, you're being consistent, but not always have like structured questions. Blake, I'd love to bring you in here and just kind of get your thoughts on that. Like, what should people be asking, or what are just some of your go-to questions?
Yeah, and I love, like, just want to give another like double thumbs up to the consistency. Like, you don't need to ask every question the exact same way every time, but making sure that every candidate is getting that same experience through you, incredibly important. Some of the pieces that I want to see in these basic screening questions is, did this person do any research? Like, are they passionate about this role? Or are they spamming their resume to 300 companies to see what sticks? Like, there's some great pieces there. The other thing that I want to hit is compensation. Like, gone are the days of the past where the recruiter's job was to lowball everyone and say, like, all right, what's the bare minimum we get you over to this company at? Like, I want to know the numbers that get people excited. I want to be that person that says, I'm bridging the gap that's going to get a great person to my company, but I'm also going to make this person an offer that's better or equal to where they're at now so that they're getting a better quality of life. Like, as a recruiter and us as HR professionals, we're putting our name behind the companies we're recruiting for, we're hiring for. And if we're not doing this as a quick sell, like, we don't get to sell them a vehicle and then walk away and say, good luck, hope this thing works. Like, we're connected to those people long term. We have to be asking the questions and getting the information so that we can be their advocate through this whole process.
Yeah, perfect. I love that. And I'd love to get everyone's really thoughts on this question. Let's go to Ben next, and then Heather, and then Catherine. But what are your go-to questions or topics that you want to make sure you cover in a screening interview?
Okay, now I know this question probably applies more to the interview right after the screening, but I'm going to say it anyway because I'm passionate about it. And then I'd love to hear if anybody has an opposing opinion. But I do not like the question of, what is your favorite spirit animal? Some random question that says, I'm really going to get to know somebody's personality by this question. No, that is not true.
I did a whole post about no stupid questions. That would be a stupid question.
Exactly.
Don't do it. I literally saw this on an application. Are you a pirate or a member of the Imperial Navy?
Or we could just ask him, are you my purple unicorn?
Exactly, right? So sometimes we ask a question just because we want to be creative or we want to see how they'll react. Well, there's a better way. Okay, so I'm just throwing that out there. Now to the answer. In a screening interview, my opinion is you're doing it very basic and you're just covering a little bit deeper of the basics still, right? The 5 to 10 minute conversation is not to get really in depth on the star and the behavior and everything else that we're doing. So for example, and sometimes you have to ask questions twice, okay? That's just how it works. So on my application, if I have my wage range and they verify that it works, great. I will double verify in the screening interview. Is this range, throwing out $20 an hour, whatever, is this range going to work for you? Okay, and then we verified it because sometimes, unfortunately, they get to the final stage and then we're way apart on wage and that just doesn't work out. And then I go off some other basic requirements and I just verify some of them. Is this schedule going to work for you? Or let me give you one deeper one. If somebody needs management experience or say programming experience, then I'll ask something that started with a yes or no on the application. Do you have programming experience? Cool. With PHP, awesome. And then in the screening interview, I say, can you tell me about your PHP programming experience? And that's when I can hear if, well, I've heard about it. Or yeah, I've done it for the last 17 years and I've done front end, back end, and everything else you could want to know. Like, great. There's my difference.
Awesome.
That's a good one.
Awesome. Heather, would you add anything to that?
Sure. The one question that I always like to ask, because again, it's keeping in mind that you are wanting to represent your organization and still kind of recruit for the organization. And you can hit 20 different highlights on your organization, but maybe only one of the 20 is interested to this candidate. So it's very important in the screening question then to ask them, so what is it that you're most interested either in this opportunity, or what are you looking for most in your next position that you'd like to have? Those two are really important because it gets them to talk about what they're interested in. And then if I need to say, oh, they really want career development, I can touch upon our career development if we need to. If they're, so whatever they kind of say, I can then pull from my list of things to get them again interested in the position. So I think that that's important. And it also can help tailor how I'm going to do it. The other thing that is again, hitting kind of what Ben was talking about was with the requirements. I recruited for a position that worked in the emergency room. So the title was like just administrating rep. It was a administrative position. So we got a lot of people in there, but if they can't handle the pressure, if they can't handle what you're going to see in the ER, it's not really going to be a good fit for them. So I did have that kind of question that would just kind of say, hey, how do you handle this type of a pressure situation? So that might be the only situational question I would ask. But again, to Ben's point, you're not wanting to go into all the stars and all the other stuff, because you don't want to take 30 minutes or 45 minutes on just the screening. You're really just trying to see, are they going to fit? Do they like the opportunity? And can we move forward to the next step?
Perfect. Catherine, what about you? Go-to questions.
So first of all, Heather, you touched on one of the most important questions, and it's the very first actual question that I ask in my interview, which is what matters most to you in your next job. That is el numero uno, and you learn so very, very much. To both Ben and Blake's point, compensation is everything. I address it at the beginning of my call. So I start every call with actually an explanation of the company and an in-depth review about that. I talk about the position, any extra insights about that, make sure we're all on the same page, let them ask questions, become comfortable. And then I dive right into what matters most to you. And by the way, part of all of that is when I do my spiel about the role, I mention the benefits and the compensation and say, does that range work for you? Yes, on we go with the conversation. If not, we stop and have a conversation about it. But then we kind of keep going. So I get it out of the way because why waste your time? Mm-hmm. The other thing I do is at the end of the call, and this is not a question, but it's a habit that I think is very important. And one of you, I believe, actually, I know Blake did. I think maybe one of the rest others of you did too, is talked about how we are the advocates for these people. And so at the end of every call, I let them know. And again, my name is Catherine McCord, because a lot of people forget, especially if you just cold call them, right? If you just called them out of the blue and didn't prep them first. And so I say, my name is Catherine McCord. And this is my cell phone number, because I always call from my cell. I say, I'm going to text you my email, or I'm going to send you another email. Please feel free to reach out to me at any point during this process with questions, thoughts, concerns, whatever it is that you need. I am here for you. And I set a specific date for follow-up. And I tell them, even if I haven't heard back, you will hear from me. And I set that at every single meeting. I put the reminder up there so the little ding goes off on the day I'm supposed to do it. I send out my feedback and we go from there. But I make sure that they understand that I'm here, and I make sure that they don't get lost in the process because they don't have any more touch points.
Awesome.
Can I jump in with one thing?
Yeah, please.
Sorry, I really appreciate what Heather and Catherine reminded us of the principle of explaining our company. I think Blake mentioned it too, so everybody's saying it. But explaining our company and asking them a question. And here's the principle. I think a lot of what we're talking about today is, how can we help the overwhelmed HR professional do recruiting? And we can say, I have 1,000 resumes, and how am I going to get them down to the magic one? And so, we can be I just need to get through it. But we do have to remember that we're working with a human on the other side, and we're kind of marketing the company. I can tell you recent experiences of being involved in interviews, and I felt like I was just being on the witness stand. And somebody's like, name, compensation, can you do this? Okay, we're done. I'm like, wait, what? Can I say anything else about what I'm looking for or ask you questions? And so even if I had moved on in that process, I would have said, well, I'm just not really interested in that company anymore. So I love those points.
Yeah. And I think we're moving in the direction of talking about something that I think people talk a lot about as being like a negative point on the candidate experience side, which is, what you're just saying, like Did they treat me like a human? And did they follow up and communicate with me really well? So I want to talk a little bit about that now, because I think we covered actually pretty well in our conversation. How do you decide who moves on from the screening interview to the next one, right? Like there's a match on compensation, they have the skills, and they have like interest level. Like it's clear that something's gonna work out. But let's talk about like at the end of the screening interview, you have a very clear picture of this applicant is now rejected or moving on to the next round. What really is your follow up and your plan to kind of communicate and move them on to the next step, whatever that may be? And Heather, I'd love for you to start this off, and then we'll jump to Blake and hear some of his thoughts as well.
Sure. Well, following on Catherine's, comments, it is very important that you do let them know when the follow-up's going to be and what it's going to be. Anybody I've ever personally talked to got a closing call for me conversation, and it's hard because sometimes you don't want to say you didn't get the role, and they might say, well, why? Is there anything else? And you might not be able to give specifics on it. So I'd always say, for me, it was more important that you at least heard from me before it closed out and you got the standard email that's saying we filled the position on there, because that again makes it more human. And I got a lot of referrals from it too, because people were so touched by the fact that I let them know, so they weren't standing around waiting forever of what happened on there. So again, it's being very clear. And as Catherine said, if I don't know, I'll at least let them know, hey, I'm really sorry. I thought we'd have some feedback by now, but we don't. As soon as I do, but you will find out, and I'll let you know as soon as I can. I think that those touch points are really important. So I think, again, it's humanizing it. It's understanding this is a stressful process. This is somebody who's, could be very nervous. They're not quite sure. And again, you want to give that right touch point, because maybe it might not be the right fit now, but you never know. 6 months from now, they might be the perfect fit. And if they have a really good experience with you from the get-go, they'll remember that, and they're going to want to come back. And they might even refer people to you, which is much better than, Ben's experience of name, phone number, thanks very much, have a nice day, bye-bye. So that's sort of how it is that I like to conclude with people.
Thanks, Heather. Blake, let's move to here and move to you and kind of hear what your take is on, and also on the people who are successful. Like, how do we follow up and set them up for the next round, right?
Yeah, so there's a few questions there, so I'll try and dive into each of them and give them some time. But I think the first thing is that like the culture of feedback needs to be dependent on where you're working. Like if you have to go take your feedback to someone and get a stamp of approval, then great, give them a time frame. But if you're the only step in the process, and at the end of the phone call, there is no reason not to tell somebody at the end of that phone call, I really liked you, let's move forward, or hey, here's a few things that I have some concerns on. Am I missing something? Like, all you're doing is making yourself have an awkward phone call in the future if you're too scared to have that conversation in the moment. And as someone who recruits and sends people messages, I try and respond to everyone that sends me a message on LinkedIn, at least have a basic phone call conversation if time permits. It is absolutely mind-blowing how few people give feedback or even a response after an interview. Like, whether it's an entry level or a senior level role, people are just letting people go and not saying anything. Like, that's unacceptable. You are getting paid to do a job where you're spending 30 minutes of time with someone. They're volunteering on their free time to help you out. You owe it to that person to give them some piece of feedback. There are things you can't say. Obviously, you've got to be careful about the feedback that you give. But at the same time, that person invested some of their life and a resource that they can't get back. Those 30 minutes that you spent with them is something they can never have back. You owe them at least a conversation as to what things are going. Also, you might find in telling them what you didn't like about them or you felt was a weakness, that you might have missed something that is actually really great for them to be able to follow up on and give them another chance for success. If you're moving them forward, we live in this world where some people think that it's cheating to tell someone what to expect on the next interview. That's craziness as well. Set them up for success. Tell them what they need to know. Give them all of the skills that they need to succeed, and then watch them shine. Like, it's going to make you look better as a recruiter. It's going to make them look better as a candidate. And you need to be building people up. The last few years have been rough for everyone. Everyone's egos have taken hits. We've all been stuck inside houses for too long. This is the time, and you have the unique experience to build people up and tell them how wonderful they are. Even if they didn't get the role, tell them what they did great. Tell them that you appreciate them spending time with you, because no matter how important this role is, the person that you're rejecting is more important because they're a human being and they've got a whole life that's important to them. So spreading that love and that support and that hope. Like, I don't know what anyone's ecclesiastical beliefs are, but if you believe in a life after this, my hell is filling out job applications and interviewing and never hearing back. It's miserable. And you feel
Going to the void.
yeah, you
The
feel
black hole.
you feel so miserable, and like no one cares about you. And like we have a responsibility to give people hope in a situation where they're one applicant out of 200 sometimes, and even if they're not getting it, they need to know that they're still important.
Absolutely.
Well
I
said.
want to hit on two things that you said because I thought that they were just great. And the first one is that you talked about, and forgive me if this isn't an exact quote, but basically, did I miss something? You know, assuming, you know, I might have missed something that makes you fit into these particular categories. So one thing that a lot of HR and recruiting professionals forget is that it is not the candidate's job to be good at interviewing, it's ours. They can be, I don't care if they're good at interviewing. I'm not hiring them to interview unless I'm hiring another HR recruiter person. I am hiring them to be good at whatever in the world it is that I need them to be good at. So I want to set them up for success. I will re-ask questions. To Ben's point is sometimes you have to ask things more than once and sometimes in a new style. And I set them up for success, but then go back and assume maybe I missed something at the end if you're about to reject them and ask. And then make sure, and I want to say too, Heather mentioned the black hole of the ATS, you know, just lost in there. And I've actually designed a very unique ATS, but one of the things that's always very important to me in any applicant tracking system, including in my own, is the ability to give very quick feedback, including rejections. So one thing that I encourage companies to do and HR persons to do is to fully utilize the ATS. Make sure you have one where you have emails that you can send out quickly. And the way I do it on rejections is I send it to, let me clarify this. This is for people I have not yet spoken with. Heather, you're right. If I've spoken with them, they get a personal contact. It's a much more robust situation. If I'm not even going to talk to them, they get an email, you know, that says the thank you very much, but I offer additional feedback too. Because to Blake's point, these are humans and they may want help and they may have questions and they want to feel, you know, that somebody actually cares. And so I also offer resources in that email to them. And I point them to some different resources that may be of help to them. So, and that's all things I send out very, very quickly back to back to back to back to back. So for the ones that we're not actually going to be speaking with. So make sure that even if you're rejecting people, that you do make it as human as possible, but also set it up so that you're not typing emails all day and dragging on your process. And then you can't follow up with the people and you can't get the hires done.
Yeah. Well, awesome. That was kind of our last topic, and I think we covered it really well. I really appreciate the humanness that you guys all brought into these processes and really teaching people to treat each other well and right and like communicate and all these things. Thank you all so much. I'm just going to show this one slide here on the screen. If you guys want to know more about screening interviewing, just stop by our HR encyclopedia. We have over 400 different entries in addition to this one. And also, please go meet the panelists. I have a link there. These are all amazing people. It's been a privilege to be connected with them and get to know them. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you, panelists, for being here. I really appreciated this so much. So hope you all have a great day.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.